my part of the presentation. I am the amateur hour. I'm going to toss it down to the professionals. Brandon, Matt, Joe, let's just tee Matt Fetick up a little bit. If I could, please give me 1 second. I'll have a slide for Matt. Those are, you know, those guys. But this guy in KW who I've met, who I would want to be, who's successful, good looking, and well-read, well-educated. This might be that guy. That's my build up to you, Matt Fetick, and you're going to deliver to this team great content, great conversation along with Brandon and Joe. So I'll turn the floor over to you, gentlemen, and let you take it from here.
Dante, you haven't seen my COVID-20 or my lack of a haircut.
All right. Thanks, Dante, for the tee up and also on the market updates. So to give everybody a heads up, I'm the team leader in Washington, D.C. For Capitol Hill. I was formerly our MCA for the 7 or 8 market center, 8 locations that we have. Financial background. So you've seen Mariah call me the Wizard of Oz. All things financial is kind of my runway with the company. I really enjoy it. And Michael's been amazing in that for KWCP, for everybody getting paid. So from a financial standpoint, big shout out to Michael Sargent and Martin Charles. They are the wizards behind the scenes, making sure cash is flowing. So I want to start off with this, mainly that the point of this conversation with Matt, Brandon, and myself is to understand that cash is king and liquidity is going to be your biggest source to get through this challenging waters. So to tee this up, most of you know who Brandon is. He's our founder and also principal broker for Keller Williams Capital Property, former founder for Brandon Green Residential, $100 million sales team, as well as coach, mentor, consultant for a lot of small business owners. And as recently, if you haven't heard his financial story, it's really amazing. I should definitely touch base with Brandon on that one. Matt is got roughly $100 million sales team in the Philly suburbs. He's an OP for 2 market centers in Delaware, as well as Ocean City, Maryland, and has a market center in United Kingdom. So that's the gentlemen that are going to be presenting on this. And from a guardrail standpoint, we're going to be talking about tactical hows for how to cut costs right now, and then also what to be looking at for the long term, 90 days out, to really protect your liquidity and managing your financials. So without further ado, Brandon, I'm going to kick this over to you, buddy.
Great. Guardrails. We have guardrails today?
I'm going to try to manage those things. I don't know what these 2 personalities.
Okay. You know, Matt Fetick, you got to watch that guy. Well, good morning, everybody. We're doing financials today, so I'm putting my glasses on here just to make sure I look the part. Excited to dive into this. Matt and I had a conversation yesterday and then looped in Joe, and we thought the way we would approach this today is from a real tactical, this is what we're doing and this is how we're doing it approach. So we could go high level theoretical, right? It's really what are we doing right now? And I thought what the structure could be for today, and Joe is going to help keep us on track, is I thought that while Matt and I are talking, I would generate 2 lists, and I'll do a screen share at the appropriate time, and we can send this around too. List 1 is like, what are we doing right now? The real short term, where we're in a moment right now, and that is requiring some aggressive and unique action as it relates to how we've gotten into where we are with the health crisis. Though there's a second list too, which is what am I setting up for the future and how are we thinking about that? Because look, there's definitely some triage opportunities today, though there's some bigger opportunities for tomorrow that if you spend a little bit of time focusing on some of the larger structural changes and opportunities in your business, not only will it set you up better for of market shifts, which we know will always be, it'll also just can kind of help secure your business at the end of this year and into next year. So that's my thought, is to really sort of delineate between the now, which is a particularly urgent, unique time, versus the stuff that's more best practices anyway, that we want to be focused on. And that's some of the stuff that you'll hear in the Agent Financials class when you attend it. So anyway, welcome, Matt. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate you, getting on, even if your COVID-19 haircut's a little shabby, but that's, hey, we're all at that point, right?
My haircut's shabby, my waistline's shabby. So much for getting ready for the summer bod, because it's long gone.
I know, I know. Oh man, yeah, I know. We're all doing the best we can. So let's kind of get into it. I'm curious, Matt, if we were to just look at the now occurrence and that occurred 3 weeks ago, it wasn't that long ago. What have you been doing on the financial side immediately? This is not the first time you've seen and experienced a financial shift. The speed of this may be unique. It is for all of us, but can you give us a sense, like, what have you done over the last 3 weeks that people should be doing as well, potentially?
Yeah, so fast is an understatement, right? I mean, it was, less than 4 weeks ago, my sales team was together and we were talking about how 2020 was going to be our best year ever. We were going to hit landmark sales. We were going to net the most amount of profit. So we kind of went into 2020 gangbusters. The weather stayed nice, right? I mean, we were out showing houses in, light jackets in February. So we thought, man, if we kind of escape the snow and the ice, we're going to be in really, really good shape. I don't think I ever in the back of my mind envisioned that we would, over a period of 3 to 5 days, we're coming to a complete stop. Now, I was glad that Dante did the numbers. I think that's really incredible to raise the flag and say, hey, there's good stuff happening here. In Pennsylvania, where my sales team is based, we're on a full work stop. We are not permitted to show homes, not permitted to show vacant homes, nothing, right? Period. That's it. So we're getting as creative as we can doing some virtual things, but we're watching, we're just kind of watching stuff tank around us. So, the interesting thing, I think, Brandon, is my mindset has been, and I think you and I have talked about this in the past, I've always kind of approached things with a sales mentality of, oh, it's all right. I'll do whatever I want to do because I can go sell another house, right? In the back of my mind, I can always just go sell another house, right? Go buy that car, take the vacation. I've always, operated under I can go sell another house because I'm not afraid to pick up the phone, right? So when I need to make money, I am more than happy to go pick up the phone and I will pound it out. I will not leave the building until I set a listing appointment. So I've always been able to bail it out,
right,
on there, right? And which creates some bad habits, right? It creates bad habits when you think like, yeah, I'm invincible, I can always bail it out. It creates bad habits. But the good thing, or the alternative side of that is, we did hit a place where I can't just go out and sell another house, right? And now we're figuring out ways to make stuff work. We're having the sellers do FaceTime showings where the sellers are actually doing, walking buyers through live on FaceTime. People still have to buy and sell. We're not going to go to zero settled in the MLS. So the question is, how do we get, as Gary Keller says, our unfair share? What does that look like, and how do we get there? So I want to take, before we talk, I know we're not going to talk about lead gen today, but I wanted that perspective on, I've always felt I could bail it out. Now my mindset 3 weeks ago was like, how do you bail it out, right? Like there's a limited amount of money in the bank, and when that money's gone, if you can't replenish it, what do you do? So we took really fast and significant action. And I know it sounds minuscule on a few things. We're a car family. We've got way too many cars, way too many cars. Our driveway looks like a used auto lot.
Really?
It's ridiculous. We've got 2 cars for every driver. So it's just dumb. And so we have been talking about getting rid of some cars anyway in there. We certainly don't need that. And thankfully, right at the beginning, and it was kind of like, we might see some quarantining. We actually sold 2 cars right off the bat on there. And so we were lucky. They were desirable cars. We're like, who cares? One, we can take the cash because we didn't owe anything on them. Number 2, getting them off our insurance and things like that. So we actually looked at our excesses at home and said, what can we do without immediately, right? What can we immediately do without? So that was the first thing. And we got rid of we sold some things. We're all over Facebook Marketplace. If it's not nailed down, we sold it. It's all sold. It's all gone. And I say that somewhat jokingly and somewhat not jokingly. In a sense, we just said, let's not do that. We also had trips planned for the rest of the year. We had some family vacations and stuff like that. Even though I still believe that we're going to get away and we'll do something, some of them were a little excessive. We went and canceled all of our airfare. right? Because we were able to get that airfare money back with 100% of a refund, right? So we reclaimed back airfares even for stuff this fall going, we'll go somewhere, we're going to need a break, but maybe we won't go as far, maybe we won't spend that kind of money. So we canceled everything going forward that we could, and we'll just take the risk, that we'll do something different, right? Or we'll do a staycation. And so we canceled stuff and went crazy.
Mm-hmm.
You and I chatted yesterday about American Express, right? I'm a big American Express fan, specifically because you can't go into debt with it, right? You got to pay it all off.
Right.
Well, there could be a day, and the problem with no limit on the American Express is you could get that number up really high and be faced with 30 days to pay it off. So we actually went into American Express and put a self-imposed low limit that we knew we could bail out. So we dropped all of our credit limit on there, self-imposed.
Yeah, I love that. I actually was on the phone with Amex this morning because I had done the same thing, but I noticed some additional charges went through. And what I was told and realized that any charges that are automated vendor charges, the whole stop those, you have to put a special stop on any automated vendor charges specifically by vendor. So yeah, I hear you on that. We went even further. We're like, no charging on the Amexes at all, because that's where everything is just fluid. And then specifically, I was like, this list of automated vendors, stop all payments there, because I want to have full 100% control on those.
Yeah. We don't generally carry much credit card debt. We tend to use almost everything on American Express. But we had about $6,000 or $7,000 worth of credit card debt that we just paid off. We said, if we need emergency money, we need to be able to have it. So while we've got the cash now, pay everything down and have zero balances. So if we have an emergency, we can access it. So we did that as well.
So I'm hearing three things so far for those that are tracking, and I'll get this up in a minute. One is any unnecessary luxuries around the house that could be sold, selling them.
Yeah.
Marketplace, whatever, it's not down. You really don't need it. Like, be really thoughtful, get rid of it. Canceling all personal trips for the rest of the year. You could put some stuff on later, but all that stuff should be canceled and get as many refunds as possible. And then controlling the spending on credit cards through limits or freezing the cards entirely.
Yeah, and Brandon, here's the tough thing for me is I'm a spender. I really am. And I think we've talked about this in the past. Like, I just tend to spend. I like to spend. I work really, really hard, and I like to spend money on stuff. And we have never put the amount away that we really should to be more comfortable. Mm-hmm. And so when stuff like that hits, like, just stop, right? Just stop. So we just went backwards. And here's the thing: thankfully, we're at a place where we can certainly carry stuff, for a good duration of time. But many of our friends can't. And so the other side of it is, who are we going to need to help? Right. So it's not just us backing out for ourselves. It's like, who's going to pop up in our life in June, July, or August that's going to be struggling, that we're going to need to make a mortgage payment for or a rent payment for to help them. So it's about protecting our assets and making sure that we've got the cash and the ability to jump in and help other people, if that comes up.
So let me ask you a question on that then. So you've got all of these expenses, but some stuff you're like, I don't know that we want to cut that because it may be an opportunity to invest in the future in a key relationship or key initiative. How are you making that determination? Is it an expense or an investment?
Yeah, well, so we just looked at it and said, we're not going to put any cash out the door for anything at the moment, right? Even our normal contributions to 401k and all that stuff, like, we're nothing, like, just full stop. We want to make sure that we've got the liquidity so that, right, we will be able to go back to work. We just don't know when, right? We'll be able to make it back. We just don't know when. So to the extent that we can keep as much cash on hand so that, if somebody called me tomorrow and said, hey, I can't make my payroll or I can't do this, right? I want to be able to step in and provide that support if somebody needs it.
I got it. So it's like the bar is no cash out the door. And then it's a one-off decision of whether or not whatever that is, that request rises to the level of send some cash out the door.
Well, and so here's the other funny thing, right? Is I hate to cook, period. We're big eat out people. We eat out frequently. We order in frequently. I'm probably the biggest user of Grubhub in the world, right? Or DoorDash. Like everybody, the people pull up in our drive and are like, hey, good to see you. Same thing on Thursday night. Like, they know us. Like we eat out a lot. Do you know how much money you can save when you go to the grocery store and cook? It's crazy. So we just even looked at stuff like that. And again, I'm not a doomsday guy. I'm just not. I just don't know what this looks like in 4 months. I just don't know. So instead of spending $80 for DoorDash on Saturday night, went to the grocery store and picked up some stuff, and made probably my first meal in months, at home.
So let me ask you, on some of these fixed expenses for your business, how are you handling things like lease payments and maybe auto payments or fixed contractual obligations that you have in the short term? What is your approach, your thoughts on that right now?
So we're talking to anybody and everybody about a temporary abatement, whatever it can be. So in my Keller Williams offices, we've gone through and renegotiated our leases for at least the next 90 days. We, even on our car payments, we've got a few car payments, we've got a business car. We went in, even though we can pay it today, if they offered a no penalty, no issue, no payment for 90 days, kind of like, same as cash type thing, where you go buy a new refrigerator, you kind of get a same as cash for 90 days thing. We looked at it and said, let's stop all payments where it's not going to hurt us. So Wells Fargo was willing to do that. Ally Bank it was like no questions asked. It was go right to their website. I'd like to hold my payments for 90 days. Think. That was it. And again, we could pay it today. My question is, can we pay it in July? And so to the extent that we can hold on to stuff as we can. So we renegotiate everything that we do. I've got an Excel spreadsheet that we're saying, okay, this payment's off until September. This one's off till August. So we're just doing it every possible place.
Now, Joe, I think you had some recent success in that too, didn't you? You were mentioning.
Yeah. So those of you, I got married in October, and obviously my wife and I going through our financials, I think, is an important conversation and journey for any relationship. And we didn't actually know what her interest rates were. And in October, I was like, well, whatever, we'll figure it out and just make the payments on it. So last week, I finally got real with it and looked at what our cash flow was. And I was looking at, between credit cards and car payment for her, was looking at $1,100 a month. So I got on Amex and we looked at her statements, saw that she had one credit card was at 26%, one was at 28%. And obviously I just didn't think about it. I was just paying the bill. Got on there through Amex. I think all three of us are Amex members for a reason. Was able to refinance her entire credit card debt to an 8% rate. And then I also, while I was on there for my personal, so you have charge cards with Amex and you have credit cards. I've got both. I was able to move my credit card just by asking them simply, hey, can you reduce my credit card APR? And it went from 13% down to 11%. So that was another thing they did instantaneously on the phone. The final piece was I had my wife get on with her lien holder. I think it's Bank of America or PNC on her car. That was at a 9% interest rate. And when I refinanced it through Bank of America, I got it at 3.69. So our monthly cash allotment went from $1,100 on those three entities down to about $700 monthly.
That's powerful. That's powerful. Thank you for that. Matt, and also potentially Joe, depending, what about any of these loans, grants, federal stuff from the SBA, any of that sort of stuff? Matt, we'll start with you. Are you pursuing any of those right now?
So we're going to pursue all of it, and I think everybody should take advantage of every possible cent, right? You can always pay it back. You can always do it. So for our businesses, we're going to apply for the CARES grants that are either going to be grants or loans, depending on how you use them. There are opportunities that are going to come out and be clear for agents. I'm going to encourage all of my agents to use it. Guys, this is, if you don't need it, you don't need it. But I'm saying get the cash in and use it for other things if you need other people, right? Use your money for other people if you have to. But I want to encourage you to take advantage of this stimulus. We are all going to be paying this stimulus back in the years to come. The money's allocated, it's there. you might as well use it to keep your business moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Joe, any comment on that?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand is that they literally cleared it this week, and there's a lot of questions from our agents, and there's also questions from us as a brokerage and leadership platform around what those details are. Where they're coming out, there's a lot of lawyers getting engaged and consultants that are standing up solely to digest this and then be able to consult with people about how to apply for it. The biggest parts I'll share with people is as we get more information, we'll definitely be rolling this out. This will be a big part for us to provide information on. But to also understand it's not finalized and there's some gray area there. But to really have your financials paperwork set on the front end, meaning like what are your tax? They're going to ask for tax returns. They're going to ask about projected revenue. They're going to ask about your expenses. So in the meantime, while we kind of sort through the minutia and figuring out how to execute on this, really to have your financials set up so that you have quick access to it because they're going to be requiring that.
Good tip. It's a very good tip. Any other comments, guys, on what to do now before we shift into what to do in the future? And by the way, folks, we will allow some time for questions here at the end. So if you've got some questions, certainly put them in the chat and we'll get to as many as possible. Any other now? No, the only, I'm trying to think if I have anything I would add to that. I think here's what I'll add that I've been doing is I've actually been going through all of the bank statements and credit card statements daily right now, because what I've noticed is 2 weeks ago when I initiated a lot of the cuts, there were a lot of things that I was able to do, but in the last week or so, new stuff has come back up, right? And I was like, oh, I forgot about that. So this isn't a one and done exercise. This is really an ongoing exercise as long as we're in this pattern to make sure that those reoccurring charges, subscription services, somebody who had your credit card and you didn't know, like all that sort of stuff is popping up at various times. So I would just say review financials daily right now.
How do you,
see what can be done?
Brandon, how do you look at, like, when you're cost cutting, does anybody ever gone down the exercise of being extreme and being like, cut everything and actually think about cutting it? And then what is the actual impact that you have? Because I think there's a discussion around like, oh, we've always done that. We definitely need that. Like, what happens if we cut it and what does it actually impact?
Yeah. Any thought on that, Matt? Like ROI, like some of this stuff, maybe you don't want to cut because it's sort of an investment still in your business. It's the oxygen for your business. Are you?
So, yeah. So here's a couple of things, right? There's a couple of perspectives I would share on that. Number one would be, I can darn well tell you there are certain things we're not going to cut. I'm not cutting Amazon Prime, right? My little bit of sanity is binge watching something from 9 to 11 at night when the kids go to bed. So, for the $10 a month, I'm going to maintain some sanity. I'm absolutely going to keep my newsletters in place for my database, right? They need to know that we're here and we're going to be here later. Now, instead of doing 2 direct mail pieces a month, we're doing 1 electronically, which costs a fraction of the amount, and then 1 direct mail piece. So we've reallocated dollars, but we cut everything back, right? So like we took all of our pay-per-click ad spending way down, and we're just playing with command and using the pay-per-click ad and command because it's had good results. So we're online taking the classes going, okay, let's try this ourselves. So instead of paying somebody else to manage our pay-per-click, we're doing it ourselves in command, right? So that saved $500. So those are the things that we're trying to do is get rid of, if I have to watch some YouTube videos so that I can do it myself. And so we haven't gone to zero, right? We're not going to go to zero spending on marketing, right? Because like I said, we still took 4 listings last week. People still need to hear from us.
Yes.
Instead of spending, and here's the other thing is we have a very big budget for client events. Our team became very focused on client events. We're not going to have a big client event in May. We're not going to have one in June. We usually host the steeplechase, a tent at a steeplechase here. And that's a $10,000 event for us that day.
Right.
Well, that's gone. We don't need it. So I'm going to take not 10, but I'm going to take 4,000 and look at different ways I can run direct mail campaigns and stuff like that.
I like that. I'm going to add repurposed costs to new initiatives that are more relevant now. I see a couple questions I want to get to real quick, and then guys, we'll pivot to what about the future. I see Pam or not Pam, Payam, I believe, is asking mortgages. Like there's a lot of conversation right now about banks that are allowing this 90-day forbearance. Have you looked into that at all, Matt?
I will go through anybody for a forbearance agreement at the moment. I would look at absolutely everything. I heard the other day on a phone call with other OPs that they were even able to get forbearance agreements on commercial loans for 90 days, right? Mm-hmm. So here's a thought, Brandon. Again, this is Matt Fetick thinking out loud.
Yeah.
One of the things that happened in 2008 and 2009 is the lenders dug their heels in and they forced people into default because they wouldn't work with people. And right. That made it worse and worse and worse and worse and worse.
Yes.
I think that they learned a lesson and said, hey, look, we're better off if we give everybody a little bit of breathing room,
right,
and put these payments on the end of the loan and keep people afloat than we do by cutting our nose off to spite in our face.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I'd say if you're going to exercise that, read the fine print, because I've seen two options. One, I've seen forbearance to the end of the loan. The other option I've seen that banks are executing is forbearance at the end of the 90 days, which means all of your payments are due at the end of 90 days. So be thoughtful. Make sure before you execute anything with your mortgage company, you've read the fine print, because that is a tricky path to foreclosure if you don't know what you're doing on that. So that's probably a whole separate conversation. But I think you're right, Matt, that last time it felt like the banks were just not going to work with anybody under any circumstances. And this time they've been night and day in terms of proactivity. Hopefully that means a different environment for.
I logged into Ally Bank yesterday to make my first payment of the month for a car loan. And right on the screen, it says, are you being impacted by COVID-19? If so, you can defer your payments 30, 60, 90, 120 days. Select here, click here. It popped up and said, you'll continue to pay interest, but no late charges. And the unpaid principal will be added to your last payment at the end of your loan, right? No negative credit bureau reporting.
That's the best I've seen.
It was fantastic. Click.
That's huge.
3 clicks, done.
I think we're going to see more of that in the coming week or two as all financial institutions really get a handle on the processes. So that's really good. So let's now, prepaying, Michael Sargent says negotiate everything, even daycare. Yep, that's right. The world has changed. Everything is negotiable. And take a look at that. I like that, Mike. Thank you, Michael. What about to set up for the future? So, what are some thoughts, just maybe going to some of the agent financial curriculum, best practices for setting up your business in the future, for the future rather, structurally, let's talk maybe about getting P&Ls up and running, entity structures. Like if you were advising an agent right now, Matt, to say, hey, you've got some 90 days here, let's clean up the house a little bit financially, what would be some of those things for long term?
You mean specifically on personal or business?
Let's go business and then go back to personal.
Yeah, so I think it just all really goes back down to if you're not going to get a immediate return, I wouldn't spend the money on it, right? And so an immediate return to me is pay-per-click that you can adjust the budgets on a daily basis, right? If I run a pay-per-click ad tonight and I get no new registrations, then I'm going to change that immediately or stop that campaign. So that's one of the best things about online marketing is we can see the immediate result and the immediate impact. And when it's not working, we can stop it. So
I like that. So we were before maybe oriented, at least certainly I have been saying, hey, let me make this investment and see if it pays off. I'm sure it will, or I hope it will, but we've raised the bar on return on investment, saying, no, if you can't see a clear line of sight to how this is and moving your business forward now, then why are you spending it? I like that.
Yeah.
What about, entity structures, Matt? Is there anything to think about or look at? Because part of the care package is also, hundreds of pages of potential tax benefits based on entity structures. Should agents be looking at their entity structure right now? S Corp, C Corp, LLC, sole proprietorships? What's your thought on that?
So that's a good CPA question in a sense. But
my asterisk, you're not a CPA. Yes, I appreciate it.
But my gut, I mean, really single member LLCs are really treated and taxed like sole proprietors anyway, in a sense. So I don't know that the entity matters as much as the documentation. Now, here's an interesting thing. For those of you that have been paying yourselves through payroll as agents, which is something we recommended way back in Agent Financials when Brandon and I first started teaching this, right? The unemployment part would be an easy recapture immediately, right? If you're not, if that would be the piece of cake. If you're an agent on payroll through your own LLC, and now there's no commissions behind it, and now therefore you could unemploy yourself, right?
Yeah.
Now be cautious to make sure you're not working then, right? Because you can't be working. The minute you the minute you've got commissions in the pipeline, you may not qualify.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because we've been advocating agents pay themselves for a while now. And part of the CARES Act and this whole payroll program, it's focused on employees. And so if you're an employee of your own company, you may have some advantages now versus if you're just getting a distribution or a dividend from your own company. So there's never been a better time, I think, to look at, and again, this is asterisk, coordinate this with your CPA, about whether or not you should become your own entity.
Yeah, for sure.
When you look at the future
Yeah.
too, Brandon, I think there's also an aspect of business owners for growth purposes that we're in uncharted waters and it's a little touch and go, but you should really be looking at being able to deploy your capital into asset appreciating type ventures. And like, what are those in a shifting market, right? Like, you look at like, I wanted to throw property management out there and have like an E&O conversation, but when you have businesses that are anti-cyclical, you can look at property management. What are the opportunities that you should actually deploy capital into that will have a return for the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah.
Even if you've got to take a small loan out with the SBA stuff. So
Yeah.
where can you look at that? Because the SBA stuff should be helping with payroll as well as future growth opportunities to get the market back moving.
Yeah, so that's very interesting, Joe. I'm saying invest in opportunities that will have a return in a new environment. So how are you thinking about return in the new environment we're in? I'm going to add here, there's never been a better time to get your P&L together, your profit and loss statement, your balance sheets, your reporting. We're seeing people that don't have that are at a disadvantage right now because all these government programs, the grants, the loans are all requesting tax returns, profit and loss statements, clarity on what your revenue was the last couple months, clarity on what your projected revenue was supposed to be in April. So if you don't have your P&L, your budgets, and all that sort of stuff together, you're at a disadvantage right now. And so, get your act together. And this is probably not the first and only stimulus that will come down the pike here. There will be more programs most likely. And so how do you get your financial reporting documents together so you're more ready for, helping to apply for these things and so forth? Matt, I think you had a comment, but you may have been on mute.
No, I was just agreeing with you. I think this is the time. You've got a little bit of extra time now. Now's the time to get your house in order. And I agree that there's going to be more stimulus this summer or fall when the tail of this is impacting us.
Yes. Yeah. Good. Let's see. So if you have any
Hey, Brandon.
Yes, Dante.
Jump in there for a second. When I think about what the setup for the future is, there are a number of things that are going to come out of the exercises that we're talking about in steps 1 through 11 at this point. Mm-hmm. That should become permanent fixtures in how we operate. Because if we do that in this environment now, what we are proving is that when things get better, we know that we can sustain that in less austere times. So there's a discipline around thinking through, like, if I make these cuts now, if I get this regimented, like, financial cadence in place now, when things change to the better, I'm going to create a different level of opportunity because of the savings I've created now relative to the explosive impact of my business once we get out of this time.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, everything we set up on the top here, like, that's good stuff. Like, there wasn't anything. Keep those habits in place because it's going to create a better delta for you on the back end of this. And you'll be able to take more advantage of that. I love that, of the profitability of your business. I love that. It's really, really good. All right, let's see. What else to set up for the future?
I mean, I think there's also an aspect, if you looked at cutting your expenses by 20 or 30%, are you going off of living off of 70% of your actual income, right? Because if your income's going to drop by 30, I think it goes back to Dante's point, is set those expenses. And then once we get out of this, to be already operating off of that. So any type of increase in revenue is going into savings or some type of liquidity, cash, money market type of thing.
I like that. I'm also going to add risk management around savings and insurance. I mean, I feel like this event has given me a different level of understanding about reserve requirements and cash on hand. I feel like I'm feeling reasonably prepared, but honestly, I still feel a little bit like I've got my pants down on this one because it's like, I don't have enough cash on hand, to be frank. And I guess, like Matt was saying earlier, I've always had a very high degree of confidence in my ability to generate revenue. And therefore, the cash that I've had set aside, I've always kept it somewhat tight and in the market. Well, right. So I'm thinking differently about cash reserves, but let me tell you about insurance too. We had this conversation earlier as a brokerage. Professional liability insurance would not likely cover this scenario. I know because I actually put in a claim on my professional liability insurance for business interruption coverage, but viruses are an exclusion to that policy. But still, there's a lot of events that are somewhat catastrophic that can happen. And so how are we protecting ourselves both from a cash reserve standpoint and then insurance for these, once in a generation can take you out of business events. So I'm just going to add, look at your insurance. See what you've got. Okay, gentlemen, I think that's a pretty good list. Anybody have any comments or questions, please type them in the chat box and we'll get to them since we've got Matt as our expert on deck today. So just kind of scrolling up. Yeah.
fail forward.
Yeah, that's right. So I've got up here, we've got, get rid of some of these unnecessary luxuries, sell those quickly, cancel trips, really old, without your specific approval. Look at cost savings within spending. For example, going to the grocery store instead of ordering it in. Long-term contracts, everything is negotiable. Rent abatements, refinance debt, reduce credit card APR. These are all great things. Pursue these SBA CARE program loans and grants. Get in line, get that stuff applied for now. Review your finances daily. This is not a one and done. And then I love, I don't know who said it. One of you did. Repurpose costs to new initiatives that are more relevant now. I think Matt may have said that. I love it. Let's see. And in the chat box, I think we've covered everything. Yes, Command. We didn't spend a lot of time on that, but Command is doing a lot for us that we used to have to pay different subscription services for. So almost everybody I've talked to who's looked at that has saved a few $100s by looking at what they pay for on a subscription basis. It can be done in Command. Okay, good. Matt, any final thoughts? Any words of wisdom for agents that are working right now to make it happen in the next 30 to 120 days?
I think my biggest challenge for folks right now is go make these decisions today as if this is going to last for 6 months. Don't rely on the comfortability of, I'm okay for I've got some money in the bank. I already paid this month's bills. I can make my car payment. If you can take advantage of a program or a deferment, right? As long as it's not worse, right? I don't want to end up having to pay 3 car payments in 90 days, right? But if you have the opportunity to do it today. Don't wait until you need it because it may take weeks to get approved, right? So get ahead of it, get ahead of the curve, make the tough decisions. You guys, this is coming from a spender. Nobody can outspend me. Trust me, I spend like a nightmare. And I wish I wasn't. So we're gonna. This is going to change the way our family is going forward. Period. So I said it's the great reset, and I'm thankful for this. But I just want to encourage you: please don't wait. Jump on it now. Make the tough decisions now, and be prepared for the future.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, everything has changed, and so our orientation needs to be about permanent changes in our business. And I like the fact that you're thinking 6-month horizon, hopefully less, but let's be prepared for it to be a little bit longer. Joe, any other thoughts from you?
I think the only piece I would go back to that daily review of like your credit cards and bank statements. It's amazing. If you looked up every day at 7 a.m. and looked at your financial position, you'd be like, why did that go through? What is this? Is it absolutely necessary? So I would just re-harp on that piece.
Great. Well, gentlemen, thank you. For anybody who wants that list, we'll figure out how to post that somewhere. But if you wanted to urgently, just shoot me a quick call, just respond to it. bgreen@kwcapitalproperties.com, and I'll toss that over to you. So thanks, Joe. I'll send it back to you.
So let's go ahead and want to make sure we're on time here. We got Q&A. Is there any questions? I know we've took some on the Zoom group chat, but just kind of open this up for Q&A for the three of us.
Hey, Joe, before Q&A, I want to point back to something Matt said very early on in this talk that echoes what I've shared with the group a couple of times. And Matt said, paraphrasing here, that there aren't zero deals being done. So I want to keep us focused on this concept that as long as there's a market opportunity, we should be zeroing in on our opportunity to get our unfair share, whatever that opportunity is. So we could take two approaches to this. We could clam up and say, well, the world's gone to hell to some degree, or we can say, this is an opportunity for those of us who are stealing up and seeing that there's business being done. We've got, like, in the next 30, 60, 90 days, there's a pool of buyers who want to buy, and there's a pool of sellers who want and need to sell. And our responsibility as business professionals and practitioners in this business is to go out and find them and be of value and service to them such that we can be the facilitator of that transaction.
Awesome. Thanks, Dante. Jared, you got to clarify for me, what is our people cutting costs ongoing after a new agent team growth? What do you mean your production's up and you're having variable costs? What do you mean by that, buddy?
Well, I'm curious if people are cutting back on spending to recruit, and the recruiting of new agents costs a lot of money with onboarding and with the market shifting. And I would anticipate the number of new agents increasing to some degree, new agents. I'm curious if people are cutting back on spending to try and recruit.
My response to that is that your biggest asset is going to be people during this time. So if you find a quality person, you're going to see not the cool part. What's actually happened to our economy is that unemployment's been at the lowest point it's ever seen in like a 100-year period. So it's been very challenging to find talented people because they've been gainfully employed. So with you seeing the unemployment skyrocket, well, not skyrocket, but have high points, you're going to see people coming into the market that are qualified. And this is one of those investments, like long-term in a new environment, that I would double down on recruitment of talented people. So once again, that's talented people. You don't want to just add people on there for the sake of adding. But I would say your detriment of your business growth would be not finding those people and bringing on qualified. So Brandon.
Hey, Joe, I'd add to that and to Jared's question, and Dana's comment in the chat box is great. Other companies are still recruiting, and you should, as a team, continue to do that. I think going back to what we were talking about earlier, how you purpose those dollars for recruiting, you have to be incredibly judicious in a time like this. So maybe it's not that you don't spend, but you have to be incredibly thoughtful about what you're spending on relative to the impact of what that spend is.
Dante, I just want to say that I'm feeling a lot of the dual career agents who are now at home have the time to be super focused on the trainings and these calls. And they may not have been able to attend calls during the day during normal situation at work. Right. But now that they're working at home, they're here and they're learning, and it's awesome.
Wow, appreciate that, Dana. Thanks.
Any other questions? Otherwise, we can probably just wrap up.
Yeah. Great.
If there are any other questions, I want to extend a huge thank you to Matt, Joe, and Brandon for facilitating awesome dialogue around agent financials. I want to say to this group, thank you guys for tuning in and being a part of this conversation today. I want to sound like my broken record and saying again, we only know what today holds. We don't know what tomorrow looks like, but whatever tomorrow is, we get through it together. We're stronger together. And we appreciate you guys from the top to the bottom of this organization being a part of who we are and us taking this ride together.